The prescription pills my son gave me weren't what the label said. I found out on a Tuesday morning when I dropped the bottle and the pills scattered across my kitchen floor. I got down on my knees, my 75-year-old joints creaking, and picked up each white tablet. That's when I noticed something strange. The pills looked different from the blood pressure medication I'd been taking for 20 years. These were rounder, smoother, different. I called my pharmacist, Jerome, who'd been filling my prescriptions since before his daddy retired and left him the store. "Jerome, baby, this is Mrs. Evelyn. I need you to check something for me." "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Evelyn. What's going on?" "The pills my son picked up for me last week. Can you tell me exactly what they are?" I heard him typing on his computer. Then silence. Long, heavy silence. "Mrs. Evelyn, I need you to bring those pills in right now. Don't take another one, you hear me? Not one more." My hands started shaking. "Jerome, what is it?" "Just come in, ma'am. Right now." Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. 20 minutes later, Jerome's face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. He'd tested 3 of the pills while I waited in his office behind the pharmacy counter. "These aren't blood pressure medication, Mrs. Evelyn. These are sedatives, strong ones, the kind they give people before surgery." He looked at me with worry deep in his eyes. "Who gave you these?" "My son Terrence picked them up last week. Said the pharmacy was busy and he'd wait for me." Jerome shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Evelyn, I never filled any prescription for sedatives in your name. These didn't come from my pharmacy. I checked our records going back 6 months. The last thing I filled for you was your regular blood pressure pills, and your son never picked them up. They're still here, waiting." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of Jerome's desk. My own son. My baby boy. The child I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college. The man I'd given my whole life to raising right. "There's more," Jerome said quietly. "These pills, in this dosage, for someone your age, with your heart condition? Mrs. Evelyn, if you'd been taking these like the label says, twice a day..." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I thought back to the past 3 weeks, the drowsiness, the confusion, the times I'd woken up not remembering going to bed, the morning I'd found myself on the kitchen floor with no memory of falling. Terrence had been so concerned, so caring. "Mama, maybe it's time to think about getting some help around here. You're forgetting things. I worry about you." I'd started to believe him, started to think maybe I was losing my mind. "Don't you worry, Jerome," I said, standing up straighter than I had in weeks. "I know exactly what to do. But I need your help, baby. And I need you to keep this between us." Jerome nodded. "Whatever you need, Mrs. Evelyn. Your mama helped mine when Daddy got sick. We don't forget. Let me tell you about my son Terrence. Beautiful baby, smart as a whip, could charm the stars out of the sky. I raised him alone after his daddy died in a construction accident when Terrence was just 7 years old, worked as a nurse during the day, cleaned offices at night, and took in sewing on the weekends. Put that boy through private school, then college, then helped him start his first business. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw him graduate, when I watched him build a life. He married Paula 8 years ago. I never did take to her, if I'm being honest. Something about the way she looked at my house, my jewelry, my things, like she was taking inventory. But Terrence loved her, and I wanted my boy to be happy, so I kept my mouth shut and welcomed her to the family. Things changed after the wedding. Terrence started coming around less. When he did visit, Paula was always with him, always steering the conversation toward my finances. "Mama Evelyn, you really should let Terrence help you manage your accounts. It's so much for you to handle alone. Mama Evelyn, have you thought about updating your will? You know, just to make things easier later." Later. Always talking about later. About after I was gone. I'd built a good life for myself. The house in Baldwin Hills, Bought and paid for 30 years ago, now worth close to $5 million. The rental properties I'd invested in over the years. The savings account I'd fed like a hungry child, putting away every spare dollar. The life insurance policy worth $300,000. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. More than comfortable. And I'd planned to leave it all to Terrence, my only child, my whole world. But now, standing in Jerome's pharmacy, looking at pills that could have killed me, I saw clearly for the first time in months. My son wasn't worried about me. He was impatient. Jerome, I need you to keep filling my real prescriptions, but I need empty bottles with these fake pills in them. I'm going to keep taking them, but not really. I need Terrence to think his plan is working. That Sunday, I went to church like I did every week. Greater Bethel AME had been my spiritual home for 47 years. I'd taught Sunday school there, sang in the choir, served on every committee they had. These people were my family, the real kind that shows up when you need them. After service, I asked Deacon Willis if I could speak with him and his wife privately. We sat in the church library, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, and I told them everything. About the pills. About Terrence's sudden interest in my finances. About the times I'd caught Paula going through my desk drawers when she thought I was napping. Sister Willis grabbed my hand. "Oh, baby, we've seen this before, too many times. These children get $signs in their eyes and forget they're raising." "What are you going to do?" Deacon Willis asked. "I'm going to find out exactly what my son is planning, and then I'm going to stop him." "You be careful, Sister Evelyn," he warned. "When people get desperate about money, they get dangerous." "I know. That's why I need witnesses, people who know the truth. If something happens to me..." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Sister Willis said firmly. "We're going to make sure of that. You're not alone in this." The next day, I called my lawyer, Malcolm Pierce. I'd known Malcolm since he was a teenager mowing lawns in the neighborhood. Now he was one of the best estate attorneys in Los Angeles. I told him I needed to see him immediately. In his office, I laid out everything. The pills, my suspicions, the way Terrence had been pressuring me to sign documents I hadn't read carefully. "Mrs. Evelyn, have you signed anything recently?" Malcolm asked, his face grave. "Last month, Terrence brought me some papers, said it was just updating my insurance beneficiary information. I was so tired that day, could barely keep my eyes open." Because of the pills, I realize now. I signed what he put in front of me. Malcolm made a phone call right there, then another, then 3 more. 2 hours later, his face was dark with anger. "Mrs. Evelyn, your son has been busy. He's filed paperwork declaring you mentally incompetent in San Bernardino County. Used a doctor I've never heard of, who supposedly examined you. The doctor's signature looks suspiciously like a stamp." My heart dropped. What does that mean? It means he's been setting up to take control of your assets. But there's more. He's taken out life insurance policies on you with 3 different companies. Total value, $2 million. All with him as the sole beneficiary. The applications are dated over the past 6 months. $2 million? I could barely breathe. "Malcolm, he's going to kill me." "Not if we stop him first. But Mrs. Evelyn, we need to be smart about this. If we confront him now, he'll destroy evidence, claim it was all a misunderstanding. We need to catch him in the act." That's when Malcolm told me about his friend who worked with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. About how they'd been investigating a string of elder fraud cases across California. About how my case could be the key to taking down a whole network of people targeting vulnerable seniors. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Malcolm leaned forward. "I need you to trust me, and I need you to be braver than you've ever been in your life." 3 days later, Terrence came to visit. I'd been taking the fake pills, putting on a show of increasing confusion and weakness. I shuffled to the door in my robe, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. "Mama, you don't look good," Terrence said, his voice dripping with fake concern. Paula stood behind him, her eyes scanning my living room like she was already picking out what furniture to sell. I'm just so tired, baby. Can't seem to stay awake lately. That's what I'm worried about, Mama. I think it's time we talked seriously about your living situation. This house is too much for you. All these stairs, all these rooms. You need to be somewhere with people who can watch you 24/7. A nursing home? I let my voice quaver. Baby, I don't want to leave my home. It's not about want, Mama. It's about what's safe. I've been looking at some facilities. There's one in Riverside that has availability. Very affordable. Very far away, I thought. Far from my friends, my church, my support system. I've also been thinking, Terrence continued, sitting down on my couch like he owned it already. It would be easier for everyone if you signed power of attorney over to me, just temporarily until you're feeling better. That way I can handle your bills, your accounts, make sure everything's taken care of. Paula handed him a folder. He pulled out papers, already prepared, already waiting for my signature. I don't know, Terrence. That's a lot to think about. Mama, you're not thinking clearly. That's the whole problem. Just sign here, and here, and here. I'll take care of everything. You trust me, don't you? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Of course I trust you, baby. You're my son. I reached for the pen. Terrence smiled. Paula smiled bigger. Then I set the pen down. But you know what? I think I should have my lawyer look at this first. Just to make sure I understand everything. Terrence's face changed. Just for a second, I saw anger flash across his features. Then the mask came back. Mama, why would you need a lawyer? I'm your son. I'm trying to help you. I know, baby. But humor your old mama. Let me have Malcolm look at it. If everything's like you say, I'll sign it next week. Paula's hand gripped Terrence's shoulder. We don't have until next week, baby. Tell her. The room went cold. Tell me what? I asked. Terrence's jaw tightened. The nursing home needs an answer by Friday. They're holding the spot for you, but if we don't commit, they'll give it to someone else. You already put my name down? Without asking me? For your own good, Mama. You're sick. You need help. Why are you being so difficult about this? Maybe because I'm not as sick as you think I am. The words hung in the air. I watched Terrence's face, watched the calculation happening behind his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Paula asked sharply. It means I'm tired, and I think you both should go. We can talk about this another time. They didn't move. I said you should go, I repeated, stronger this time. Terrence stood slowly. We're trying to help you, Mama. But if you're going to be stubborn, that's on you. Just remember, when something happens because you're too proud to accept help, you can't say we didn't try. Was that a threat? My own son threatening me in my own home? They left, but not before Paula took one last long look around my living room, her eyes lingering on my grandmother's china cabinet, the paintings I'd collected over the years, the silver tea service that had been in my family for 4 generations. I locked the door behind them and called Malcolm. They just tried to get me to sign power of attorney. When I refused, Terrence basically threatened me. That's good, Malcolm said, and I could hear the sound of him typing. That means they're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Mrs. Evelyn, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. How far are you willing to go to stop them? As far as it takes. Even if it means they think you're dead? My breath caught. What are you talking about? I've been talking with my FBI contact. We think Terrence is going to try to kill you, or at least make it look like you died from natural causes. Those pills were just the first attempt. When that didn't work fast enough, he'll try something else. We want to let him think he succeeded. You want me to fake my own death? We want to give you a chance to see exactly who your son really is, to hear what he says when he thinks you can't hear him anymore, to catch him in the act of whatever he's planning. And Mrs. Evelyn, based on what we've found, He's not working alone. There's a whole network of people involved in this. Your case could save dozens of other elderly people from being victimized. I thought about all those years of sacrifice, all those nights I went to bed hungry so Terrence could eat, all those times I chose to fix my shoes instead of buying new ones so I could pay for his school trips, all the love I'd poured into raising a good man, and this is what I'd raised. Tell me what I need to do, I said. 1 week later, I collapsed at church during Sunday service. The ambulance came, rushed me to the hospital. By Monday afternoon, the doctors delivered the news that my heart had finally given out. By Monday evening, I was dead. Except I wasn't. I was in a safe house in Inglewood, very much alive, watching through a laptop as Malcolm met with Terrence to discuss my estate. But the real show would come at my funeral. Malcolm had arranged everything. The death certificate was real enough to fool everyone except the coroner, who was in on the plan. The funeral home was owned by Malcolm's cousin. And the body in the casket at my funeral? A practice dummy dressed in my favorite purple dress. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. Malcolm had set up hidden cameras throughout the chapel. FBI agents would be in attendance, disguised as mourners, and I would be there too, in the back row, wearing a wig and dark glasses, looking like just another grieving friend. I was about to attend my own funeral. I was about to hear what my son really thought of me. I was about to find out just how deep his betrayal ran. Friday night, Malcolm came to the safe house with news. "Mrs. Evelyn, we intercepted a phone call. Terrence called someone, a man named Rico. We've been tracking Rico for months. He's a contract killer who specializes in making deaths look natural. Older victims, usually. Makes it look like accidents, heart attacks, overdoses." My blood ran cold. Terrence hired someone to kill me? The call was recorded. Terrence said, "The old bird finally dropped. Make sure it stays that way. I don't want any surprises at the funeral. Mrs. Evelyn, he thinks you might not be dead. He's planning to make sure." What does that mean? Malcolm's face was grim. "It means Rico is going to be at your funeral. And if he suspects you're not really in that casket, he's been instructed to finish the job. Mrs. Evelyn, this has gotten more dangerous than we thought. We need to call it off." I shook my head. "No. We're doing this. That man, Rico, he's killed other people's mothers, hasn't he?" Malcolm nodded. "Then we're stopping him. We're stopping all of them. I'm not backing down now." Saturday morning, I put on a simple black dress, a gray wig, and glasses that made me look 20 years older than I already was. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Good. The church was packed. Greater Bethel AME had turned out in force. I saw my choir sisters, my Sunday school students, the deacons and deaconesses I'd served with for decades. Real tears on real faces. They thought I was really gone. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Malcolm, Deacon Willis and his wife, Jerome the pharmacist, and the FBI agents scattered throughout the crowd. I sat in the back row, my hands shaking. The casket was closed, covered in purple flowers. My favorite color. Everything looked so real. Terrence sat in the front row with Paula. I watched them, watched how they held themselves. Paula was checking her phone. Terrence kept looking at his watch. The service began. Pastor Johnson spoke about my life, my service to the church, my dedication to my son. People testified about how I'd helped them over the years. Sister Willis sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and waiting for. Pastor Johnson asked if anyone wanted to say a few words about the deceased. Terrence stood up. Terrence walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and cleared his throat. I leaned forward in my seat, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "My mother," he began, his voice breaking in all the right places, "was a difficult woman." A murmur rippled through the church. That wasn't how you started a eulogy. She was stubborn, set in her ways, refused help even when she clearly needed it. He shook his head, like he was sad about it. In her last months, she was confused, forgetful. It broke my heart to watch her decline. I gripped the pew in front of me. Every word was a lie. But despite her difficulties, despite her stubbornness, I tried to be a good son. I tried to help her see reason about her living situation, about her care needs. She fought me every step of the way. Paula dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the grieving daughter-in-law. Now that she's gone, I want everyone here to know that I did everything I could. Everything. And now I have to deal with the burden she left behind. This house she refused to leave, the properties she refused to properly manage, the financial chaos she created by refusing to let me help. People were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't grief. This was complaint. So, here's what I need to say. Terrence looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the service. I'm accepting offers on the property starting Monday. The house in Baldwin Hills needs to go to someone who will actually appreciate it and take care of it. If anyone's interested, contact me after the service. Cash offers preferred. The church erupted. People gasped, started whispering. Pastor Johnson stood up, his face dark with anger. But Terrence wasn't done. Paula and I have been through hell taking care of my mother. Now it's time for us to live our lives. We've got a cruise booked for next month, and we're using the life insurance money to finally do something for ourselves. He said it, right there, at my funeral, standing 10 feet from my casket. He talked about spending my life insurance money before they'd even put me in the ground. Sister Willis stood up in the choir loft. Boy, have you lost your natural mind? Your mama ain't even cold yet. My mother was a burden, Terrence snapped back, his mask slipping completely. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. I gave up years of my life trying to deal with her stubbornness, her refusal to... That's enough. Malcolm's voice cut through the church like a knife. He stood up from where he'd been sitting in the third row, holding a folder. Terrence Williams, I think you've said quite enough. Who are you to interrupt my mother's funeral? Terrence demanded. I'm Malcolm Pierce, your mother's attorney, and I have something everyone needs to hear. Malcolm walked to the front of the church and pulled out a small recording device. He pressed play. Terrence's voice filled the church, crystal clear. I need her gone, Rico. She's not dying fast enough. The pills aren't working. I need this done by the end of the month. Another voice, deeper. You want it to look natural? I don't care how it looks. I just need it done. She's sitting on $5 million in property, and she won't sign anything over to me. The old bat is too stubborn to die on her own. It'll cost you. I'll pay whatever. Just make it look like her heart gave out. She's got a condition. No one will question it. The church was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Paula jumped up. That's fake. That's fabricated. You can't... There's more, Malcolm said calmly. He pressed play again. This time it was a different conversation. Terrence and Paula, talking in what sounded like their car. Paula's voice. Did you get her to sign the power of attorney? Terrence. She wants her lawyer to look at it first, getting suspicious. Paula. Then we moved to Plan B. Rico says he can make it look like she fell. Old people fall all the time. Terrence. What about the life insurance policies? If they investigate... Paula. They won't. We've done this twice before, remember? The system works. File for incompetency in a different county, collect the insurance, move on. Your mother's just another name on the list. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Twice before? My son had done this to other people? Malcolm stopped the recording. Would Rico please stand up? A man in the back stood. Dark suit, graying hair, looked like any other mourner. He pulled out a badge. Special Agent Ricardo Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I've been undercover for 8 months investigating an elder fraud ring operating across California, Nevada, and Arizona. Terrence Williams, Paula Williams, you're both under arrest. FBI agents appeared from everywhere. They'd been disguised as mourners, ushers, even one of the choir members. They moved toward Terrence and Paula, who were backing away from the casket. "This is insane!" Paula screamed. "His mother is dead! You can't arrest us at a funeral!" "Actually," a woman's voice said from the back of the church, "that's where you're wrong." Everyone turned. I stood up, pulled off my wig and glasses, and started walking down the aisle. The church exploded. People were screaming, crying, shouting. Sister Willis fainted into Deacon Willis's arms. Terrence's face went white as a sheet. "Hello, baby," I said to my son. "Surprise, your mama's not dead." Terrence stumbled backward. No, this isn't possible. You died. The hospital said what I asked them to say, with the help of some very good people who wanted to catch you in the act." Paula lunged at me. 2 FBI agents grabbed her before she got within 5 feet. "You crazy old woman! You can't do this! That's entrapment!" "Actually," Agent Martinez said, pulling out handcuffs, "it's called a sting operation. And it's completely legal when investigating attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and identity theft." "Identity theft?" Terrence's voice was barely a whisper. Malcolm stepped forward with another folder. "You want to tell him, Mrs. Evelyn, or should I?" "You go ahead, Malcolm. I don't think I can look at him right now." Malcolm opened the folder. Over the past 18 months, Terrence Williams has filed death certificates for his mother in 3 different counties: San Bernardino, Riverside, and San Diego. In each case, he collected life insurance policies totaling over $1 million. He used forged doctors' signatures, fake death certificates, and bribed coroners to process the paperwork. The church gasped. Pastor Johnson gripped the pulpit, his knuckles white. "But it gets worse," Malcolm continued. "Terrence and Paula have done this to at least 6 other elderly victims across 3 states. They identify wealthy seniors, usually widows or widowers with adult children who live out of state. They befriend them, gain their trust, convince them to sign power of attorney, then systematically drain their accounts. When the victims get suspicious, they're either placed in nursing homes under false incompetency claims, or they die of natural causes." "You're lying!" Terrence shouted. "You don't have proof." Agent Martinez smiled grimly. "We have 18 months of surveillance, wiretaps, financial records, and testimony from 3 other victims who survived your schemes. Plus, you just confessed on tape to hiring me, who you thought was a hitman, to murder your mother. I'd say we have plenty of proof." The agents moved in. Terrence tried to run in the church, but there was nowhere to go. They had him in handcuffs within seconds. Paula was screaming about her rights, about lawyers, about how this was all a misunderstanding. Then someone else stood up, a woman I didn't recognize sitting in the middle section. She was young, maybe 30, professional-looking. "Mrs. Williams," she said, walking toward me. "My name is Detective Sharon Hayes, LAPD Elder Abuse Unit. I need to inform you of something." My stomach dropped. What now? "We've been building a case against your son for 3 years, but there's someone else involved. Someone bigger." "Who?" I asked. The church doors opened. 2 more people walked in, also in handcuffs, escorted by uniformed officers. One was a woman in her 50s, wearing expensive clothes and too much jewelry. The other was a man in a suit, carrying a briefcase. "That's Dr. Raymond Foster," Detective Hayes said, pointing to the man. "He's the one who's been signing the fraudulent death certificates and incompetency declarations. And that," she pointed to the woman, "is Vanessa Chen. She runs the entire operation." Vanessa looked at me and smiled. Actually smiled. "You must be very proud of yourself, Mrs. Williams. You've caused quite a disruption to a very profitable business." Business? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're talking about murdering elderly people for their money." "I'm talking about helping people access their inheritances in a timely manner," Vanessa said calmly. "Adult children who have worked hard, who deserve to enjoy their parents' wealth rather than watching it sit in bank accounts while their parents waste away in nursing homes. We provide a service, You're a monster, I said. Vanessa shrugged. I'm a businesswoman. And your son was one of my best partners. Too bad he got sloppy with you. If he'd just been patient, let the pills do their work, we wouldn't be in this mess. Detective Hayes stepped between us. That's enough. Get her out of here. As they led Vanessa out, she called back over her shoulder, You haven't won, Mrs. Williams. You have no idea how deep this goes. The judges we own, the lawyers on our payroll, the cops who look the other way. You're just one old woman. You can't stop all of us. The church doors closed behind her, but her words hung in the air like poison. Malcolm touched my arm. Mrs. Evelyn, you should sit down. This is a lot. But I couldn't sit down, because suddenly, everything was hitting me at once. My son had tried to kill me. My own child had looked at me and seen nothing but dollar signs, had plotted my death, had hired someone to murder me. And he'd done it to other people, other mothers, other fathers. How many? How many families had he destroyed? I looked at Terrence standing there in handcuffs, and I didn't recognize him anymore. That wasn't my baby. That wasn't the child I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. Mama, he said, and his voice cracked. Mama, please. I can explain. Explain? The word came out as a sob. Explain what, Terrence? Explain how you tried to poison me? Explain how you hired someone to kill me? Explain how you stood at my funeral and talked about selling my house before they'd even put my body in the ground? I needed the money. You don't understand the kind of debt I'm in. Paula's spending, the business failures, the investments that went bad. You needed to ask, I screamed it, loud enough that my voice echoed off the church walls. You needed to come to me, talk to me, let me help you. I would have given you anything, Terrence, anything, but you chose this instead. You chose to kill me. I wasn't going to let it happen, he said, tears running down his face now. I was going to call it off. I was going to. You're lying. You've always been lying. I don't even know who you are anymore. Agent Martinez stepped forward. We need to take them downtown. Mrs. Williams, we'll need you to come to the FBI office tomorrow to make a formal statement. Detective Hayes will coordinate with you on the LAPD side of the investigation. I nodded, unable to speak anymore. They led Terrence and Paula out. My son looked back at me once, his face pleading. I turned away. The church was chaos. People were crying, talking, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Pastor Johnson was calling for calm, asking everyone to please stay seated. Then Sister Willis came down from the choir loft and wrapped her arms around me. Oh, baby. Oh, sweet Jesus. Thank God you're alive. More people crowded around. My church family, my real family, surrounding me with love and prayers and tears of relief. Deacon Willis, Jerome the pharmacist, the choir members, the ushers. They'd thought I was dead, and now here I was, alive but broken in a different way. I want to say something, I managed to get out. Pastor Johnson handed me the microphone. I looked out at the congregation, at all these beautiful faces. People who'd loved me, supported me, mourned me. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry for deceiving you all. I'm sorry for making you think I was gone. But I needed you to see what I saw. I needed witnesses to what my son really is. Because if I just told you, if I just said my son was trying to kill me, some of you wouldn't have believed it. You would have thought I was confused, sick, paranoid. Heads nodded. It was true. But now you know. You all saw it. You heard it. And I need you to remember what you saw today. Because according to that woman, Vanessa Chen, this goes deeper than just Terrence and Paula. There are other people involved, powerful people, and they're going to try to make this go away. We won't let them, Sister Willis said firmly. We're witnesses, all of us. That's right, Deacon Willis added. They want to silence you. They'll have to go through this whole church first. And we're not quiet people, someone called from the back. Laughter, real laughter, broke the tension. Pastor Johnson took the microphone. The Bible says in Psalm 37, "The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. Sister Evelyn's day of justice has come, and this church stands with her." "Amen!" the congregation shouted. But even surrounded by love, even knowing I'd won this battle, I felt hollow inside, because my son was gone. Not dead, but gone in a way that was somehow worse. He'd become someone I didn't know, someone I couldn't save. Malcolm pulled me aside as the church began to disperse. "Mrs. Evelyn, there's something else you need to know. We found records of bank accounts in your name that you never opened. Accounts that were drained over the past 2 years. We're talking about close to $800,000. I felt dizzy. 800,000? Your rental property income, dividend payments, Social Security deposits? They were routing everything to these fake accounts. The only reason you didn't notice is because they were careful to leave just enough in your real accounts to cover your basic expenses." "Where did the money go?" "Vanessa Chen's organization. Terrence was paying them a percentage of everything he stole from you. It's how their business model works. They provide the infrastructure, the fake documents, the contacts. The partners like Terrence provide the victims and do the groundwork. So they've been robbing me for 2 years, and I never even knew?" "You were too busy being sedated by the pills they gave you. Mrs. Evelyn, if you hadn't dropped that bottle, if you hadn't called Jerome, you'd be dead within a month. The sedatives were just to make you compliant while they drained your accounts. Once the money was gone, they would have moved to the final stage." I sat down in the nearest pew. 2 years. For 2 years, my son had been systematically destroying me. "Can I get any of it back?" Malcolm hesitated. "We're going to try, but that money's been moved through so many accounts, offshore holdings, shell companies. It's going to be a long process, and Mrs. Evelyn, there's no guarantee." So I'd survived. I'd exposed them, but I'd still lost almost everything. Agent Martinez approached. "Mrs. Williams, I need to tell you something. You're in danger." "What?" "Vanessa Chen wasn't bluffing about having people on her payroll. We know she has at least 2 judges, several lawyers, and 3 police officers in her pocket. Until we can identify all of them, you're not safe. We're going to need to put you in protective custody." "For how long?" "Could be weeks, could be months. We're dismantling a criminal organization that's been operating for over a decade. There are a lot of people who want you silenced before you can testify." I looked around the church, my home for almost 50 years. The place where I'd baptized Terrence, where I'd buried my husband, where I'd found comfort and strength through every trial of my life. Now I couldn't even stay in my own house because my son's crimes had made me a target. "Okay," I said quietly. "Whatever I need to do." But inside, I was screaming. 3 months in protective custody felt like 3 years. The FBI safe house was comfortable enough, but it wasn't home. Every day I woke up in a strange bed, looked out at a strange street, and remembered that my own son had made this necessary. Malcolm visited twice a week with updates. The investigation was expanding. They'd found 12 more victims across 4 states, all elderly, all wealthy, all targeted by Terrence, Paula, and Vanessa's network. Some had died. Their deaths ruled natural, their families none the wiser as Terrence collected life insurance policies he'd secretly taken out in their names. But I wasn't just sitting around waiting. Agent Martinez had asked me to do something that terrified me: testify before a grand jury. Not just about what Terrence had done to me, but about everything I'd learned, everything I'd witnessed. "Mrs. Williams," he'd said during one of his visits, "you're the only victim who survived and caught them in the act. Your testimony could put Vanessa Chen away for life, could shut down this entire operation. But I need to be honest with you about what you're facing. Tell me." Vanessa's lawyers are the best money can buy. They're going to paint you as a vindictive mother who set up her own son. They're going to claim you faked your death to frame him. They're going to argue that those recordings were manufactured, that the whole funeral was a setup to entrap innocent people. But we have evidence. The fake death certificates, the insurance policies, the other victims. We do. But they're going to fight this every step of the way. And Mrs. Williams, they're going to come after you personally. Your age, your health, your credibility. They're going to make you relive every moment of what your son did to you. In front of cameras. In front of the whole world. I'd looked at Agent Martinez and thought about all those other families. The ones who'd lost their mothers, their fathers, and never knew it was murder. When's the trial? I'd asked. Now, standing outside the courtroom in downtown Los Angeles, I was regretting my courage. The media was everywhere. Cameras, reporters, people shouting questions. Malcolm and Agent Martinez flanked me, guiding me through the chaos. Mrs. Williams, did you really fake your own death? Mrs. Williams, do you hate your son? Mrs. Williams, is it true you're doing this for money? We pushed through to the courthouse entrance. Inside, the hallways were packed. I saw faces I recognized from church, from the neighborhood. Sister Willis was there with half the choir. Deacon Willis had organized a prayer circle that met outside the courthouse every morning before proceedings began. But I also saw other faces, hostile faces, people holding signs that said Free Terrence Williams and Elder Abuse Hoax. Paula's family was there, glaring at me like I was the criminal. The courtroom was massive. Wood paneling, high ceilings, the seal of the state of California on the wall behind the judge's bench. I took my seat in the witness section, my hands shaking. Terrence sat at the defense table with 3 expensive lawyers. He was wearing a suit I'd bought him for his college graduation. He wouldn't look at me. Paula sat at a separate table with her own legal team. Vanessa Chen sat with hers. Dr. Foster had taken a plea deal and would be testifying for the prosecution. The judge entered. The Honorable Patricia Morrison, a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. All rise. The trial began. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Agent Martinez testified about the investigation, the surveillance, the recordings. Detective Hayes presented evidence of the other victims. Malcolm explained the fake death certificates, the forged documents. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand on legs that barely held me, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. The prosecutor, a young woman named Angela Davis, approached with a kind smile. Mrs. Williams, can you tell the court about the pills you discovered in March? I took a deep breath and began. I told them everything. About finding the pills, about Jerome the pharmacist, about the weeks of pretending to take medication that could have killed me, about discovering the life insurance policies, the fake death certificates. And when you learned your son had hired someone to murder you, what did you feel? I felt like my heart was breaking, I said, my voice cracking. Because I loved my son more than my own life. I would have died for him, but he wanted me dead for money. Objection! Terrence's lawyer jumped up. The witness is being inflammatory. Overruled, Judge Morrison said. The witness is answering the question. Continue. Mrs. Williams? I looked directly at Terrence for the first time since the trial started. I gave you everything. Everything I had, everything I was, and it still wasn't enough. Terrence's face crumpled. He started crying, real tears this time. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. Angela continued. Mrs. Williams, why did you decide to fake your death? Because I needed the truth. I needed to know if my son was really capable of what I suspected. And I needed witnesses. If I just told people, they might not have believed me. But when he stood at my funeral and talked about selling my house, when he talked about spending my insurance money, everyone heard it. Everyone saw who he really was. And how did that make you feel? Like I'd lost my child. Like the boy I raised was gone and a stranger had taken his place. The defense attorneys took their turns. Terrence's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gregory Stone, came at me hard. "Mrs. Williams, isn't it true that you have a history of conflict with your daughter-in-law?" "I wouldn't call it a history. I never trusted Paula, if that's what you mean." "And isn't it true that you disapproved of your son's marriage?" "I wanted my son to be happy. But yes, I had concerns about Paula's interest in my finances." Concerns? Or jealousy? An elderly woman, alone, watching her son build a life with someone else? "Objection!" Angela was on her feet. "Counsel is testifying." Sustained. "Mr. Stone, ask questions, don't make speeches." Stone smiled. "Mrs. Williams, you claim you were sedated by pills your son gave you. But isn't it true you've been prescribed anti-anxiety medication in the past?" 20 years ago, after my husband died, for 6 months. "So you have a history of mental health treatment." "I have a history of being human and grieving my husband. That's not the same thing." "And isn't it convenient that the pills you claim were sedatives mysteriously appeared, were tested by a pharmacist who's been your friend for decades, and then disappeared?" "They didn't disappear. The FBI has them in evidence." "Allegedly. But we only have your word and the word of Jerome Baker, your close personal friend, about what those pills were. No other independent verification." Malcolm leaned over and whispered to Angela. She nodded and stood up. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call a rebuttal witness. Dr. Lisa Chen from the State Toxicology Lab." A woman in a white coat took the stand. She testified that she'd analyzed the pills independently, without knowing where they came from or who they belonged to. They were indeed sedatives, in dosages that could be fatal to someone with my medical history. Stone's smug expression faltered. But he wasn't done with me. "Mrs. Williams, you've testified that you loved your son, that you gave him everything. Yet you're here, trying to send him to prison for the rest of his life. That doesn't sound like love to me." I looked at him steadily. "You're right. It doesn't sound like love. It sounds like justice. Because love without truth is just enabling. And I won't enable him to hurt anyone else." No further questions. Paula's attorney was worse. She implied I was senile, vindictive, possibly suffering from dementia. She suggested the entire funeral was an elaborate scheme to steal Terrence's inheritance. "What inheritance?" I finally snapped. "Everything was mine. I earned it, I saved it, I built it. Terrence didn't inherit anything because I'm not dead." The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order! I will have order!" But the damage was done. The jury had seen Paula's lawyer trying to twist reality, and they hadn't liked it. Vanessa Chen's attorney didn't even cross-examine me. That should have been my first clue something was wrong. The prosecution rested. The defense began their case. Terrence took the stand. His testimony was masterful, I had to admit. He painted himself as a devoted son, concerned about his aging mother, trying to help her manage finances she no longer understood. He claimed the pills were a misunderstanding, that he'd picked up someone else's prescription by mistake. He said the recordings were taken out of context, that when he talked to Rico, he was actually talking to a mechanic about his car, and the FBI had edited the audio. It was all lies. Smooth, believable lies. Paula testified next. She cried on the stand, talked about how much she loved Mama Evelyn, how she'd tried so hard to be a good daughter-in-law. She claimed I'd always resented her, had tried to turn Terrence against her, and that this whole trial was my revenge for losing control of my son. Then Vanessa Chen testified. She was calm, professional, utterly convincing. She denied everything. Said she ran a legitimate estate planning business. Said Terrence and Paula were clients, nothing more. Said the money they'd paid her was for legal consulting services. "I have never encouraged anyone to harm an elderly person," she said, looking directly at the jury. "My entire business is built on helping families navigate difficult end-of-life planning. These accusations are baseless." Her lawyer presented documents, testimonials from satisfied clients, proof of her business license and credentials. I watched the jury. Some of them were buying it. Angela did her best on cross-examination, but Vanessa had an answer for everything. She was too smooth, too prepared. We broke for lunch. Malcolm pulled me aside in the hallway. "This isn't good, Mrs. Evelyn. The jury's wavering. Vanessa's playing the respectable businesswoman perfectly, and Terrence's testimony about the pills being a mistake is creating reasonable doubt." "But we have the recordings. We have Dr. Foster's testimony." Dr. Foster took a plea deal. The defense is painting him as unreliable, saying he's lying to reduce his sentence. And the recordings, without Rico actually doing anything, are just words. Terrence claims they're taken out of context. So what do? We pray, and we hope Angela can pull a miracle in closing arguments. We returned to the courtroom. The defense rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next morning. That night, alone in the safe house, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Terrence's performance on the stand, about how convincing he'd been, about how the jury had looked at him with something like sympathy. What if they believed him? What if Vanessa went free? What if all those other families never got justice? My phone rang. It was Malcolm, and he sounded strange. "Mrs. Evelyn, something's happened. Can you turn on the news?" I grabbed the remote, switched on the TV. Breaking news. Major development in elder fraud trial. A reporter stood outside the courthouse. In a stunning turn of events, a key member of the alleged fraud ring has come forward with new evidence. Sources say this individual approached prosecutors late tonight with information that could change the entire case. I sat up straight. "Malcolm, what is this?" "I don't know yet. Angela just called me. She's reviewing new evidence right now. She says it's big, really big. Mrs. Evelyn, she wants you at the courthouse first thing in the morning, before the trial resumes." I barely slept. At 6 a.m., Malcolm picked me up. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Angela met us in a conference room. She looked like she'd been up all night, but her eyes were bright with something like hope. "Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you something. Did you ever suspect that Terrence had family you didn't know about?" My blood went cold. "What?" "Because late last night, a woman named Crystal Monroe walked into our office with a story you need to hear." The conference room door opened. A woman in her 40s entered. She had Terrence's eyes, Terrence's nose, Terrence's walk. "Mrs. Williams," she said quietly, "I'm your son's half-sister, and I have proof that Terrence has been doing this for a lot longer than anyone knows." The room started spinning. "Half-sister? But that's impossible. My husband died when Terrence was 7. There was never—" "Not your husband," Crystal said. "My father, Vernon Monroe. He had an affair with a woman named Denise Williams 38 years ago. That woman gave birth to Terrence." I couldn't breathe. No, Terrence is my son. I gave birth to him. I was there." Crystal's expression was pitiful. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry. But Denise Williams died in childbirth. The hospital made a mistake. They gave you the wrong baby." Angela pulled out a folder. "We ran DNA tests on Terrence as part of the investigation. Standard procedure. Mrs. Williams, the results came back 2 weeks ago. We were trying to figure out how to tell you." She handed me a paper. I stared at it, at the words that made no sense. 0 genetic match for mother-child relationship. "Terrence isn't my son?" It came out as a whisper. "Biologically, no," Angela said gently. "But Crystal has something else to show you." Crystal opened her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. My father kept records, diaries, documents. He knew about the hospital mistake, and he knew that the woman raising his biological son had no idea. He tracked Terrence his whole life, sent money anonymously, watched from a distance. She spread the papers on the table. There were photos of Terrence at different ages, report cards, medical records, and notes in an unfamiliar handwriting, documenting everything. When my father died 3 years ago, I inherited his papers. I found out about Terrence. I wanted to reach out to tell him, but my father's notes warned me not to. He said Terrence was dangerous, that he'd shown signs of sociopathy from a young age. My hands were shaking. This can't be real. There's more, Crystal continued. My father was wealthy, very wealthy. When he died, his will left everything to his biological children, including Terrence. $20 million. $20 million. My mind couldn't process it. Terrence knew, Angela said. We found emails between him and the estate lawyers. He's known for 3 years that he's not your biological son and that he inherited a fortune. Mrs. Williams, he's been living off that inheritance while systematically draining your accounts. But why? If he had $20 million, why steal from me? Crystal's voice was barely audible. Because Paula doesn't know about the inheritance. She thinks Terrence is broke, thinks they need your money to survive. Terrence has been playing both sides, taking your money to make Paula think he's providing, while hiding his real fortune in offshore accounts. And there's something else, Angela added. Crystal brought us bank records. Terrence has been paying Vanessa Chen for years, not just for help defrauding you, but for help defrauding other elderly people, including Crystal's father. Crystal wiped her eyes. My father didn't die of natural causes. The death certificate says heart failure, but I found receipts, emails. Terrence paid Vanessa to arrange it. He wanted his inheritance early. Terrence killed your father? I could barely say the words. Our father. And he tried to kill you. Mrs. Williams, you raised him, loved him, gave him everything, and he's not even your biological son. But he's still a murderer. Angela stood up. This changes everything. We can prove that Terrence has been defrauding people for years, that Vanessa's organization helped him murder his biological father, and that this whole operation is even bigger than we thought. Crystal's willing to testify. But won't this hurt Mrs. Williams? Malcolm asked. The jury finds out Terrence isn't her biological son. They might think she has less reason to care about justice. Or, Angela said, they'll see that she raised a child who wasn't hers, loved him like her own, and he still betrayed her. Either way, we can't hide this. It's material evidence. I looked at Crystal, really looked at her. She had kind eyes, sad eyes. Why are you doing this? I asked her. Why come forward now? Because my father's last diary entry was about you. He wrote, Evelyn Williams raised my son better than I ever could have. She gave him love, stability, everything I couldn't provide. She deserves to know the truth, and she deserves justice. I read that, and I knew I had to help you. Court reconvened at 9 a.m. The courtroom was packed. Word had leaked that there was new evidence, and the media was in a frenzy. Judge Morrison took the bench. Ms. Davis, I understand you have new evidence to present? Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Crystal Monroe to the stand. The next 2 hours were a blur. Crystal testified about her father, about the inheritance, about the documents she'd found. The defense attorneys objected constantly, but Judge Morrison allowed most of the testimony. Then Angela dropped the bombshell. Ms. Monroe, can you tell the court about the DNA test? Crystal looked at me, her eyes apologetic. Terrence Williams is not Evelyn Williams' biological son. There was a hospital mistake 42 years ago. The son Mrs. Williams gave birth to died shortly after delivery due to complications. She was given another baby by mistake. That baby was my half-brother, Terrence. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly. Reporters were frantically typing. The jury looked shocked. Terrence's face had gone white. He was whispering frantically to his lawyers. Paula looked like she'd been slapped. She was staring at Terrence, mouthing words I couldn't make out. Angela continued. And can you tell the court about the inheritance Terrence received? Crystal detailed everything. The $20 million, the offshore accounts, the proof that Terrence had been living in luxury while claiming to be broke. Then she testified about her father's death, about the suspicious circumstances, about the evidence she'd found linking Terrence and Vanessa to his heart attack. My father was 58 years old and healthy. 3 days after adding Terrence to his will, he was dead. The same doctor who signed Mrs. Williams's fake death certificates signed my father's death certificate. Dr. Raymond Foster. Vanessa Chen's lawyer was on his feet. "Objection! This is hearsay and speculation." "Your Honor," Angela said calmly, "Dr. Foster is waiting outside. He's willing to testify that he falsified Vernon Monroe's death certificate at Vanessa Chen's request and that Terrence Williams paid for the service." Judge Morrison looked at Vanessa. "Counselor, does your client wish to make a statement?" For the first time, Vanessa Chen looked worried. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, "We request a recess, Your Honor." "Denied. Dr. Foster, please take the stand." Dr. Foster entered the courtroom, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years. He told everything. About the network Vanessa had built, about the doctors, lawyers, and officials on her payroll, about the dozens of elderly victims, about Vernon Monroe's murder. "Terrence Williams paid me $50,000 to make Vernon Monroe's death look natural," Dr. Foster said. "He wanted his inheritance early. Vanessa arranged everything." Terrence stood up suddenly. "That's a lie! He's lying to save himself!" His lawyers tried to pull him down, but he shook them off. "Your Honor, I request permission to make a statement." Judge Morrison looked at him coldly. "Sit down, Mr. Williams." "No. I have a right to defend myself." "You have a right to remain silent, which I suggest you exercise." But Terrence was beyond reason now. "She's not even my real mother. Why should I care what happens to her? She raised someone else's kid for 40 years and never even knew it. What kind of mother doesn't know her own child?" The courtroom went silent. "I owed her nothing," Terrence continued, his voice rising. "Nothing. She got to play mother, got to feel good about herself, but I knew. I've known for 3 years that she's not my blood. And when I found out about my real father, about my real family, about the money that was rightfully mine—" "Terrence, stop talking!" His lawyer was practically screaming. But Terrence was unraveling. "I deserved that money. I deserved to be free of her church, of her expectations. I worked too hard pretending to be her perfect son. So yes, I gave her pills. Yes, I hired Rico. Yes, I wanted her dead so I could finally live my life." Agent Martinez stood up in the back of the courtroom. "Terrence Williams, you're under additional charges for the confession you just made." Terrence realized what he'd done. His face crumpled. He collapsed back into his chair, his hands over his face. Paula was crying. "You have $20 million? You've had it for 3 years and you let me think we were broke? You let me help you steal from an old woman when you were rich the whole time?" "Paula, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're a liar? A murderer? That our entire marriage is a fraud?" She stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Vanessa Chen's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to negotiate a plea agreement." "I bet she does," Judge Morrison said dryly. "We'll discuss that in chambers. But first, I want to say something." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Williams, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things. But what your son, what Terrence Williams did to you is one of the cruelest betrayals I've ever witnessed. You raised a child who wasn't yours, loved him, sacrificed for him, and he repaid you by trying to murder you. The fact that you had the courage to expose him, to go through this trial, to fight for justice not just for yourself, but for other victims, speaks to the strength of your character." She turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, in light of the defendant's confession, I'm directing you to return a verdict of guilty on all counts. We'll reconvene for sentencing in 2 weeks." The gavel came down. It was over. The courtroom exploded with noise, reporters rushing out, people crying, shouting. The FBI agents led Terrence away in handcuffs. He didn't look at me. Crystal approached me slowly. "Mrs. Williams, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know my father's estate, the part that Terrence inherited, it's going to be seized as proceeds of crime. But there's still my portion, and I'd like to help you recover what was stolen from you." "You don't have to do that." "I want to. My father wrote that you were a good woman. The documents prove it. And family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. You showed up for Terrence every day of his life, even though he wasn't yours. That's more than my father ever did." Sister Willis was suddenly there, wrapping me in a hug. Then Deacon Willis, Jerome, half the church. They surrounded me, a wall of love and support. Malcolm was beaming. "We won, Mrs. Evelyn. We actually won." But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt hollow. Over the next 2 weeks, the rest of the story unfolded. Vanessa Chen took a plea deal, 25 years in prison in exchange for naming everyone in her network. 12 judges, 37 lawyers, 43 doctors, and over 100 partners like Terrence. The FBI called it the largest elder fraud ring in American history. Paula cooperated with investigators and received a reduced sentence of 5 years. She genuinely believed they needed the money, had been manipulated by Terrence as much as anyone. Dr. Foster got 10 years. The other doctors and officials in Vanessa's network got various sentences ranging from probation to life in prison. And Terrence. My son, who wasn't my son. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Multiple counts of attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, and the murder of Vernon Monroe. At his sentencing, Judge Morrison asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up, my legs shaking, looked at Terrence one last time. "I loved you," I said simply. "I loved you like you were my own flesh and blood. And you were, in every way that mattered. I would have given you everything. All you had to do was ask. But you chose this. You chose greed over love. You chose murder over family. And now you have to live with that choice for the rest of your life." Terrence was crying. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I'm not your mama," I said quietly. "I don't know who you are anymore. Maybe I never did." I turned and walked out of the courtroom. 3 months later, I stood in my living room in Baldwin Hills. The house I'd almost lost. Crystal had helped me recover most of the stolen money. The rental properties were back in my name. My accounts were secure. Greater Bethel AME threw me a welcome home celebration. The whole church showed up. They brought food, flowers, and so much love I thought my heart would burst. Pastor Johnson led a prayer of thanksgiving. Sister Willis sang. Deacon Willis gave a testimony about the power of truth and justice. "Sister Evelyn showed us something," he said. "She showed us that even when the people closest to us betray us, even when the pain seems unbearable, we can still stand up. We can still fight. We can still choose right over easy." Jerome the pharmacist stood up. "If Mrs. Evelyn hadn't called me about those pills, if she hadn't trusted me enough to tell the truth, she'd be dead. And Terrence and Vanessa would still be out there, hurting other people. She saved lives by being brave." Crystal was there too. We'd been talking, getting to know each other. She wasn't Terrence, but she was a connection to the truth. And she was kind. "My father wrote in his diary that he wished he'd been brave enough to tell the truth years ago," Crystal said. "That he'd watched Mrs. Williams raise his son and wished he could thank her. Well, I'm thanking her now. For being the mother my father couldn't be. For showing Terrence what love looked like, even if he chose not to accept it." That night, after everyone left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about everything that had happened, about the son I'd lost, about the life I'd almost lost, about the truth I'd uncovered. I'd won. The criminals were in prison. The network was dismantled. Other families were getting justice. But I'd also lost. The child I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, was gone. Not dead, but gone in a way that was permanent. I looked at the photos on my mantle. Terrence at every age. Graduations, birthdays, holidays. A lifetime of memories with a child who'd never really been mine. I took the photos down, one by one, and packed them in a box. Not to forget, but to move forward. On my coffee table was a new photo. Crystal and me, taken at the church celebration. We were smiling. Two women connected by tragedy, but choosing to find family in the aftermath. My phone rang. It was Malcolm. "Mrs. Evelyn, I wanted to let you know. The FBI just contacted me. Because of your case, they've identified 47 other victims who were targeted by Vanessa's network. Families are getting their money back. Criminal charges are being filed. You did that. Your courage started a wave of justice." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet and let myself cry. For the son I'd lost. For the innocence that was gone. For the years of love that had been real for me, even if they'd been a lie for him. But I also cried with relief. Because I was alive. Because I'd fought back. Because I'd won. The next morning I went to church. Sat in my usual pew. Sang the hymns I'd been singing for 47 years. Prayed with people who'd stood by me through the darkest time of my life. After service, a young woman approached me. She was crying. "Mrs. Williams, my name is Tasha. My grandmother was one of Vanessa Chen's victims. She died 2 years ago, and we never knew it wasn't natural. But because of your case, they reopened the investigation. We finally know the truth, and the people who killed her are going to prison. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to fight." I hugged her while she cried, and I realized something. I might have lost a son, but I'd gained a purpose. A voice for the voiceless. A fighter for the vulnerable. At 75 years old, I was just getting started. That's all for today's story. If this touched your heart, please subscribe and share your own experiences below. We're all in this together.